say is the result. It repeats many ideas that we, or others before us, have already expressed. Our aim is not originality, but inclusiveness. We offer a survey of human experience, not of personal revelation. Here, as so often in the past, we must gratefully acknowledge the help and counsel given us by our daughter Ethel. Will and Ariel Durant. Chapter 1. Hesitations. As his studies come to a close, the historian faces the challenge. Of what use have your studies been? Have you found in your work only the amusement of recounting the rise and fall of nations and ideas, and retelling sad stories of the death of kings? Have you learned more about human nature than the man in the street can learn without so much as opening a book? Have you derived from history any illumination of our present condition? Any guidance for our judgments and policies? Any guard against the rebuffs of surprise or the vicissitudes of change? Have you found such regularities in the sequence of past events that you can predict the future actions of mankind or the fate of states? Is it possible that, after all, history has no sense, that it teaches us nothing, and that the immense past was only the weary rehearsal of the mistakes that the future is destined to make on a larger stage and scale? At times we feel so, and a multitude of doubts assail our enterprise. To begin with, do we really know what the past was, what actually happened? Or is history a fable not quite agreed upon? Our knowledge of any past event is always incomplete, probably inaccurate, beclouded by ambivalent evidence and biased historians, and perhaps distorted by our own patriotic or religious partisanship. Most history is guessing, and the rest is prejudice. Even the historian who thinks to rise above partiality for his country, race, creed, or class betrays his secret predilection in his choice of materials and in the nuances of his adjectives. The historian always oversimplifies and hastily selects a manageable minority of facts and faces out of a crowd of souls and events whose multitudinous complexity he can never quite embrace or comprehend. Again, our conclusions from the past to the future are made more hazardous than ever by the acceleration of change. In 1909, Charles Péguy thought that the world changed less since Jesus Christ than in the last 30 years. And perhaps some young doctor of philosophy and physics would now add that his science has changed more since 1909 than in all recorded time before. Every year, sometimes in war every month, some new invention, method, or situation compels a fresh adjustment of behavior and ideas. Furthermore, an element of chance, perhaps of freedom, seems to enter into the conduct of metals and men. We are no longer confident that atoms, much less organisms, will respond in the future as we think they have responded in the past. The electrons, like Cooper's God, move in mysterious ways their wonders to perform, and some quirk of character or circumstance may upset national equations, as when Alexander drank himself to death and let his new empire fall apart, 323 B.C., or as when Frederick the Great was saved from disaster by the accession of a Tsar infatuated with Prussian ways, 1762. Obviously, historiography cannot be a science. It can only be an industry, an art, and a philosophy. An industry by ferreting out the facts, an art by establishing a meaningful order in the chaos of materials, and a philosophy by seeking perspective and enlightenment. The present is the past rolled up for action, and the past is the present unrolled for understanding. Or so we believe and hope. In philosophy, we try to see the part in the light of the whole. In the philosophy of history, we try to see this moment in the light of the past. We know that in both cases this is a counsel of perfection. Total perspective is an optical illusion. We do not know the whole of man's history. There were probably many civilizations before the Sumerian or the Egyptian. We have just begun to dig. We must operate with partial knowledge and be provisionally content with probabilities. In history, as in science and politics, relativity rules, and all formulas should be suspect. History smiles at all attempts to force its flow into theoretical patterns or logical grooves. It plays havoc with our generalizations, breaks all our rules. History is Baroque. Perhaps, within these limits, we can learn enough from history to bear reality patiently and to respect one another's delusions. Since man is a moment in astronomic time, a transient guest of the earth, a spore of his species, a scion of his race, a composite of body, character, and mind, a member of a family and a community, a believer or doubter of a faith, a unit in an economy, perhaps a citizen in a state or a soldier in an army, we may ask under the corresponding heads: astronomy, geology, geography, biology, ethnology, psychology, morality, religion, economics, politics, and war, what history has to say about the nature, conduct, and prospects of man. It is a precarious enterprise, and only a fool would try to compress 100 centuries into 100 pages of hazardous conclusions. We proceed.
Is it possible, after all, that history has no sense? Does it make sense?
Well, a lot of people have thought that. Voltaire thought that history is the record of the crimes and absurdities of mankind. I thought that was a very unworthy definition. I should say that history is the record of the activities of mankind, and it has two sides. One is the crimes and absurdities. The other is the contributions to civilization, the lasting developments which enabled each generation to proceed with a larger heritage than the one before. And that, to me, is the meaning of history.
Well, turning to this book, The Lessons of History, that I have, I'm fascinated that the first chapter is marked Hesitations. You, in fact, ask a question that I would like to ask you. You say, of what use have your studies been? And you ask, what have you found in your work? Only the amusement of recounting the rise and fall of nations and ideas and retelling the sad stories of the death of kings. Has it had meaning, in other words?
Well, the meaning of history is that it is man laid bare. You see, there are two ways of arriving at a large perspective, which would be a definition of philosophy, a large perspective. One is by studying the external world through science in all its aspects. You come to some general conclusion then, the way Herbert Spencer did, approaching it from that point of view as an engineer. The other is to examine how man has behaved for the last 6,000 or 10,000 years. And consequently, history becomes the best guide we have to what man is. And we have to presume that one of the lessons of history is that he continues to behave, basically, in each generation as he behaved in the generations before. His instincts are the same. The basic situations that he faces are the same. Naturally, he makes similar responses. He makes political organizations. He makes love affairs, marriages. He overeats in each generation and so forth. So that the present is the past rolled up for action. And the past is the present unrolled for understanding.
Chapter 2. The Meaning of History. History, said Henry Ford, is bunk. As one who has written history for 25 years and studied it for 45, I should largely agree with the great engineer who put half the world on wheels. History as studied in schools, history is a dreary succession of dates and kings, of politics and wars, of the rise and fall of states. This kind of history is verily a weariness of the flesh, stale and flat and unprofitable. No wonder so few students in school are drawn to it. No wonder so few of us learn any lessons from the past. But history as man's rise from savagery to civilization, history as the record of the lasting contributions made to man's knowledge, wisdom, arts, morals, manners, skills, history as a laboratory rich in 100,000 experiments and